Hey, I've got some good news. I was reading a story out of the Good News Network, and sometimes the Good News Network stories are a little vague. But apparently there was a lady, and she was in a small, one of those little private planes, and she was being flown from, I believe they said, Las Vegas to someplace in California. And apparently the lady's pilot went into cardiac arrest, and God rest his soul, he ended up perishing, right? But here's the crazy thing. We've heard of these stories before. She ends up letting the flight tower, or whoever the people are on the other end of the CB or whatever, she ends up letting them know, oh my goodness, my pilot has gone into cardiac arrest. What the heck do I do? And I find it amazing that it seems like whenever the flight tower talks to these people that have no idea how to fly a plane, and some way, somehow, they're able to talk to them and help them land the plane. So this lady, who they left nameless, guys, she was able to safely land the plane. They were able to take the pilot to the hospital where, like I said, he later perished, but he didn't perish on the plane, he perished at the hospital. But either way, here's my question for you. Do you think you could do that? Do you think somebody could calmly talk you into flying a plane that you had no idea how to land, or calmly talk you into how to not only fly the plane, but then ultimately land the plane? And here's the thing, if you successfully pulled it off, don't you think you would have to start going to flight school to learn how to get your pilot's license? Because if you can pull that bad boy off successfully, you almost would feel like it's fate that you become an airline pilot. I hear a lot of stories through my years of people that became football players, or they became soccer players or something, but they did it indirectly. For example, let's say you're a soccer player, you love soccer your whole life. For whatever reason, you end up getting out of soccer, but then you end up, in the twilight of your career, you end up kicking field goals for a football team. I find those stories amazing. Every now and then you'll hear a story of like a female soccer star that's trying out for like a male college football team as like a place kicker or something. I think those are cool stories. Do I think it's the safest thing for women to play American football? No, and there's always a chance that the kicker can get nailed, and every now and then they do. So it's not necessarily the safest position either. But let's be honest, those stories are pretty neat. And if you're a woman that can kick a 50-yard field goal, that's pretty darn impressive. I played soccer, like little league soccer, when I was growing up. So I always enjoyed playing soccer, but I was never much of a fan of watching it until the women's team became real popular in the 90s. I know the women's team has been popular ever since because they're very good on the national and world level, right? Probably world level more so than national. Nobody's playing them at the national level. But anyway, if you guys are into women's softball or women's soccer, let me know. I'm a firm believer that there are some sports that if they were on TV a little bit more, they would be popular, namely women's softball, because we already know women's soccer is on a lot. I enjoy women's soccer during the Olympics because they're usually one of the teams that can really push for gold medals. But to get back to this lady, that flew herself down. It's like, too bad they didn't say her name, but at the same time, that just goes to show you that not everybody wants the limelight. Not everybody needs to have their name known to the world. Sometimes as you get older, especially in this world with social media, sometimes you realize that the best way to go is to really enjoy your privacy. You know, people used to really value their privacy a lot more in the 90s and 80s and before. Since the year 2000, especially with the advent of things like the YouTube and the internet in general, I think we can all agree we've gotten to the point where I don't think we value our privacy as much. As a matter of fact, some people are such public figures that there's really no such thing as privacy at all. But anyway, let's be honest, that is a wonderful story. I'm so glad that the woman is still alive to be with her family. And if anything, this might have a profound effect on her future from the standpoint of, I'm sure there's at least a little piece of her that doesn't really think she should be alive today. So imagine if you were given a second chance, some way, somehow you land the plane. I think the first thing I would do is I would sign up for lessons to get my pilot's license, I think, if that occurred. But that's one of those things that's never really appealed to me. I am totally okay with the captain flying the plane. I don't necessarily need to learn that. But at the same time, if this happened to me, I'm telling you, I would take pilot's lessons, and I would learn how to fly that plane. Which again, you already kind of know how to do it because you did it. So very, very cool. What a great story. Whoever you are, lady, you're lucky and you're blessed. Congratulations. And you're skilled at piloting. Not a bad deal. This next story that I'm going to share with you is a story of love between a sister and brother. It's cloaked in negativity because it is a sad story, and I believe it comes out of Chicago. But what would you do if you took care of your brother who is a survivor of lung cancer, and in 2022 your brother actually, because of the lung cancer, had to have his voice box removed, making him mute? Now imagine you take care of your brother, so every couple of days you go and check on him. You let yourself in with the key and you take care of your brother. That was the story of 61-year-old Tony Landers. Guys, 61-year-old Tony Landers' sister came into his house. The first thing she noticed was a bloody footprint. She goes through the kitchen, through the hall, into the living room quarters, where she is met with the horrific scene of her brother Tony lying perished, unalived, right? And the horrible thing, there are no stab wounds, there are no gun wounds. Her baby brother was actually beaten to death. 61-year-old frail brother. The story definitely pointed to the fact that he was very frail because, again, cancer survivor, mute because they took out his voice box. And the sad thing was, you could tell in her voice as she's describing what she saw and what she went through, you could just tell that it really hurt her to know that her brother was literally beaten. The life was beaten out of him. That is horrible. I don't know about you, but that's probably one of the toughest things that I've heard in a long time. What I don't understand is how a person, they were saying because there was no break-in, it looks like he probably let the person in. Now, I don't know if that means it was a neighbor or a friend, but a lot of times we end up finding out that the people that do these crimes are neighbors and or friends. So what that means is, even if you think that your weird neighbor is okay, you should really go with your gut. You know, if your neighbor gives you the weird, creepy, crawly feeling, go with your gut and don't allow people like that to get into your inner circle. Don't allow people like that to come into your home. I think what happens is we give people the benefit of the doubt a little too much. You know, your gut tells you, hey, this guy's a little weird, but every time I say hello, he says good morning. Guys, that's not necessarily a good reason to validate letting a neighbor or friend come into your home. This is yet again another reason why, especially if you live alone, instead of getting cats, maybe get a dog, you know? I'm not a big fan of pit bulls because it seems like every time a child is mauled, it's by pit bulls or Rottweilers, right? No offense if you own pit bulls or Rottweilers, but you know what I'm trying to say. It seems like they're always attacking little kids, right? But at the same time, there are also dogs that are very much able to protect you. And I can't help but think that a nice dog might have been able to protect Tony Landers. To be 61 years old and taken out by beatings like that, very horrific. And if you could have heard the trembling crying that the sister had in her voice, very, very sad. And that's why I walk, because on these same channels that show these sad things every day in places like Chicago and Houston and Philadelphia, it seems like they never have any good stories to balance it out. As a matter of fact, I've never watched so much news from other cities around the country, but when you do, you really start to get a sense of dread and hopelessness. I like those dogs, they're really cute, but my goodness, I am glad that I'm not their neighbor. Could you imagine just hearing your neighbor's 4 dogs every day barking? That's another reason why I think it might be good to keep the number of animals you have to maybe 2, maybe 3, if that 3 includes a cat, you know, because cats don't really make too much noise. But I notice in my neighborhoods, and I've noticed this forever, people let their dogs bark at like just the worst hours of the day. You know, keep the dog inside till 8 or 8:30. Again, a lot of you guys probably have dogs outside barking now. It's not that huge of a deal. But my goodness, when your dogs bark in unison at every single thing that walks by, you know, when I was younger, we would hear words like noise pollution. I haven't heard noise pollution in forever. And the reason we used to hear noise pollution, tell me if this gives you guys a flashback. Do you guys remember in the 90s, vehicles would drive real low to the ground, right? And they would have like little lights underneath their vehicles that would glow. So they would have green glowing lights or pink glowing lights. And then they would have these giant booming systems, these giant speakers in the back of their vehicles. And they would put the bass up to 100%, maybe even 200%. And they would go through neighborhoods and your house would shake. Tell me you guys remember that. You'd be in your house watching TV and all of a sudden you'd feel vroom, vroom. And you'd be like, what the hell is that? And it's some guy driving down the street with his bass put up to masked blacks, to max blast. And yeah, that's my early memories. A bunch of little kids in the neighborhood booming their music. Nowadays, when you hear that, usually it's not as good. You'll hear like the rattling of the whole car, like, it's like, God, turn that shit off. Shit sounds horrible. We were just cooler in the 90s. We had our shit together. We were cool back then. Guys, I have another sad story for you. This one is out of Detroit. A 45-year-old police officer, I believe they said he was a sheriff or he was a member of the anti-gang unit task force. He was one of these guys that when there's people held up in the house holding someone for ransom, he would be a part of like the SWAT teams going in. So he was very, very good at shooting at a distance and very, very trained. So he was obviously very, very potentially deadly. Apparently he wanted to take his own life, but he wanted to do it via cops. You know how they want cops to take them out? Well, apparently in Detroit, he made a 911 call. They send 2 fellow officers out there. They're obviously going out there knowing that their fellow officer is having kind of a mental breakdown. I think we've all been there. We've all had tough days, right? And they're going out there thinking, hey, we need to talk this guy down. And the first thing that guy does is he pins them in their vehicle and he starts shooting at their vehicle. And they assume that's so that the cops will shoot back at him and take him out. That was the guy's goal. He ends up nailing both cops in the leg, and they end up having to pull out their firearms and take him out. And it's just really scary because the guy was 45 years old, which means he's younger than me, younger than most of us watching, right? And golly, you're really hoping that if anybody can keep their wits about them, that it's, the police force. But that just goes to show you that so many people have so many stresses in their life. And why is stress important? Well, stress helps move the world, right? You need to have the stress of that upcoming rent or mortgage payment to motivate you to get outside and go to work. You need to have the stress of your health being poor to motivate you to get outside and work out or take a walk, right? And one of the things that walking does is it can not only help us with stress and our weight, but it can help us bring things down to earth. Now, I'm not saying a walk would have saved this guy, and I'm not saying that a walk can take away your feelings of wanting to end yourself. But technically speaking, your walk can help you come down to earth and not make such a mountain out of every molehill. So in that regard, I can't help but think that maybe if this guy did have a nice walking routine, things might have been different. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're clinically depressed and you're really in the feeling blue constantly, I don't know if a walk's necessarily going to help you. As a matter of fact, where I try to think of positive things while I'm walking, there's definitely the potential to think negative things. So again, a walk might not have been the save-all for everything, but at the same time, if you're in a position, if you're feeling miserable, maybe that would be a good time to resign and try to find something different. One of the reasons that people have hobbies is because the world is a disappointing place at times. And what I mean by that is, have you ever been into crocheting? Or maybe when you were a young person, maybe you collected baseball or football cards. Maybe you like to play video games. Maybe you collect Coca-Cola or John Deere memorabilia. These are different things I remember different friends doing throughout life. I even had friends that would collect bubblegum wrappers, and they would make intricate little necklaces and jewelry out of bubblegum wrappers. People do incredible stuff with their hobbies. And you always wonder, gosh, why do Becky and John waste so much money on such a goofy hobby? Well, you want to know something? If that goofy hobby makes you happy, then it's not really wasting your time or money. And if that goofy hobby keeps you mentally uplifted and keeps you going, looking forward to the next piece of your hobby that you can buy, right? You've been looking for this baseball card forever. You walk into a baseball card shop and you see it there and you decide to purchase it for an exorbitant, crazy amount. But when you find it, you feel like, oh my gosh, I found that magical card. Guys, those are things that make the world go round for people. Don't poo-poo those things. I remember when I was a little boy, I used to collect these things called garbage pail kids. Now, the girls had Cabbage Patch Kids. Those were actual dolls, and some of you ladies might even have had a little bit of a collection. If you did have a Cabbage Patch Kid collection, let me know. But I used to have a Garbage Pail Kid collection, and they were basically baseball cards of little kids that looked like Cabbage Patch Kids, but they were called Garbage Pail Kids, and they would have pictures of boogers coming out of their nose, or they would have pictures of explosions coming out of their body. I know that sounds a little crazy, but they were all meant for fun. And I just remember that I, along with hundreds of other kids back in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, would collect these Garbage Pail Kid stickers. And I know for a fact, almost every one of you guys probably remember what I'm talking about. Why do people do these goofy things? I'll tell you why. They make life more fun. So instead of poo-pooing a hobby, go find a hobby. Now, if your hobby's like mine and you love walking, then we already know how great our hobby is, right? But there's other hobbies that you can do on top of that. You know, if you love cartoons, don't poo-poo that. Watch cartoons with the kids and grandkids. I think that's a great hobby. You know, I think that we can all agree that when we were younger, our cartoons were better too. You know, we had the Coyote and Roadrunner. We had Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny. More importantly, we had the babysitter. Who's the babysitter? Scooby-Doo. Man, if Scooby-Doo and Scrappy and them, if they were your babysitter too, share that with me. Now, I bet you when I mentioned Scooby-Doo, I bet you some of you were smiling because you probably remember letting yourself into your home after school, turning on Scooby-Doo, and watching Scooby-Doo, another show that I used to love that's not cartoon related, but I used to feel like another one of my babysitters was the Skipper and Gilligan on Gilligan's Island. Oh my God, I used to love that show. I also loved how every handful of shows, the professor would be creating something that just looked like the neatest thing ever. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but they would be building boats and rafts. I remember once, I think they even built a little car, and I think Gilligan was like a taxi driver in this little makeshift bamboo car. If you guys remember that, let me know. But I'm smiling from ear to ear because, gosh, I just feel like our childhoods were so much more innocent than the childhoods now. You know, there's so many negative things that are filling the heads of our kids, and I think it's having a really bad effect on them. They're no longer walking to school. They're all becoming overweight. They're no longer looking as their friends like, hey, these are friends for life. These are good kids. Everybody's that quick away from being your enemy. It wasn't like that when we were little. And I feel bad for the kids nowadays. This park has a little red robin, and he's very shy. Every time I try to get him on camera, he takes off and doesn't let me get him. But I'm hoping that he stays still for just a minute. He's right on top of this Acacia Park sign. Look at that beautiful red color. He probably sees me getting close. Tell me he's perched right above. He's right there. Look at that beautiful color. Holy moly. I hope you guys saw him. I'll try to focus the lens and do a close-up view. Guys, I apologize. Sometimes in the mornings, I just don't really speak well. Sometimes my words are a little garbled, a little word salady. That's probably why I haven't been making fun of different political figures lately. Everyone on politics, they're always made fun of for having word salads. But you want to know? Sometimes you just have to go with what pops in your head, and sometimes it doesn't come out the clearest. But again, here's the thing. I would rather be talking with you, getting out all the babble, so that when I go into work, I'm ready to perform. So, you know, again, we look at things and we say, gosh, in the morning, sometimes Jesse can barely put together a sentence. How is his mental? My mental is fine. I just wake up sometimes, try to hear a story real quick, and then go out and talk with you guys about it. I don't really have time to practice. That's what always gets me. I'm one of these guys, I figure, golly, if I had the full day to do my YouTube channel, how much more polished could I get it? But you want to know something? I'm just happy to be out here walking with you every single day. That's why I walk, guys. I try to get my thoughts straight. I try to get my plans for the day kind of thought about in my head. I'm not one of these guys that busts out a calendar and plots their day for the next 2 or 3 weeks. By the way, we've talked about this before. Have you ever tried making plans with those people that are really into setting their calendar up? It's one of those things where you learn a lot about your friends and if they really like you. Because a lot of times if you ask them out of the blue, hey, there's a really good movie. You want to go catch this movie? A lot of times they'll say, oh, I wish you would have told me earlier. I already have plans, right? But then on the very same situation, if it's flipped and all of a sudden you have plans with those people, it seems like they never have any trouble calling you last second and canceling plans with you. If you have a friend like that, where every time you want to get together, they never have time for you, and every time you have a time scheduled with them, they cancel it, I hate to say it, but they probably don't really like your company that much. Because one thing I found in life is that people that genuinely like you, they want to hang out with you. I have a friend named Tressa, and anytime I want to check out a new restaurant, she's there. Anytime I want to go check out a movie, but I don't want to watch the movie alone, she's there. Now, that doesn't mean that she's some pushover that doesn't have a life. She's actually one of these people that is constantly out doing things. Good morning. Hey, there's a lady jogging with her dog. That dog looks like a tough, stocky boxer, too. Now, a lot of times those boxers are really nervous wrecks. When I'm talking about boxers, I'm talking about that dog breed. I've met different friends through the years that have dogs like that, and they always seem to be nervous wrecks. I don't know what it is about that breed, but they look like they're just ready to freak out all the time. But I'll tell you what, if that lady was my girl or my wife or my daughter, I love the idea of her jogging with a big looking gnarly dog like that. That gives you a little confidence that, hey, mom's gonna go out on a run with the dog, she's probably gonna return. Some of these people live in neighborhoods where it's like, my God, you're taking a risk just by going for a walk, you know? If you guys have any stories of neighbors through the years that were, hurt by other neighbors, let me know. Because I feel like that's another thing that's kind of changed since I was a little kid. I felt like when I was a little kid, most neighbors knew their surrounding neighbors. Most people knew the people that were 2 or 3 houses this way and 2 or 3 houses that way and across the street, right? Whereas now you could live next to somebody for a decade and never even really learn their first name. And half the time you see a video about neighbor interactions, it's negative. It's about people that are neighbors from hell. If you've ever had a neighbor from hell, let me know. I remember one time I lived in an apartment complex not too far from here, and I had neighbors that lived underneath me. And one time their electricity went out, and they jumped into my balcony and plugged in a cord and were literally stealing my utilities. I freaked out. There was another time where they opened up the lid. I think it was them, but I couldn't prove it. They opened up the lid on my barbecue and they threw what looked like to be a used condom on my barbecue grill. Now, I don't know about you guys, but you come out and you see that on your barbecue grill, that takes your energy up a notch. And this is one of the craziest things I ever did. I actually went up to their apartment and I go, who did it? Let's go. And there's literally 4 or 5 dudes in this apartment, but they must have noticed that I had the devil in me because none of them wanted to come out. I was ready to take on all 5 of them. I'm one of these guys, really, really mellow, but man, especially when I was younger, I could get pissed. Now, I don't want you to think that means that I was one of these guys that would get pissed. No, that was like the only time I had gotten pissed in like a 10-year period. But certain things gross me out. I don't want to think about eating my steak or my, piece of meat, on a grill that has somebody's gnarly, gross condom that looked used. I don't know if that means somebody spit into it or if it was actually ejaculate. I don't even like to think about it, but needless to say, I think I threw away that grill. Now, I know you're thinking, Jesse, the fire kills all the germs. Screw the germs, man. There's a mental aspect to wanting to eat on a grill that has a condom on it. I think I got rid of not the whole grill, but the actual metal grill portion. And I think I was able to find a replacement some way, somehow. But man, what a gross story. I've had a couple of different gross stories with neighbors. I also had that same exact neighbor. I would have my daughter over on Wednesdays, and that neighbor would literally throw parties on Wednesdays at 2 in the morning with music blaring. And it's like, holy crap, you get some people that are just rude. I think that's what blows me away about the world. You'd like to think that you can go to your neighbor and say, hey, it's Tuesday night, it's 1 in the morning, can you lower that? And then they say yes, and then 30 minutes later, they put the volume back up. You know, it's like, golly, really shows you where you stand with your neighbors. You gotta learn to be a decent human being to people, treat others the way you would want to be treated. And you know what's interesting, these same folks, if I would have done that to them, waking them up at 2 or 3 in the morning with music blaring, they would have probably knocked on my door and said, who the hell does that? That's rude. But then here they are doing it to me. We're trying to get this natural fence here growing. Anyway, I want you guys to have a wonderful day. Say a prayer for me. I'm always trying to come up with new ideas. It's very challenging when you do a video every day to come up with new ideas, but I still want to. So if you can, say a little prayer for me. If you have some fun ideas, share them down below. I'm always willing to listen. And with that being said, Venters, I want you to have a wonderful day. Take a little extra credit walk. It's good for you. And we'll see you tomorrow.